Hi, my name is Rich Eiler with the NorthPoint Group. Today we're going to walk you through one of our products called Shared Services Value Analysis, SSVA. Shared Services Value Analysis increases the value from a shared services initiative by providing a strategic governance framework and identifying the unmet and unidentified needs of the internal customers. From a strategic governance framework, SSVA provides alignment between the services model and the business model. It enhances the business model and service model understanding between the two entities and the communication between the two entities. Due to the collaborative nature of the methodology, it also supports the cultural change that's desired from implementing shared services. The solution also identifies business risks and value opportunities. For the risk side, it identifies the root cause of performance impediments. From an unmet and unidentified needs standpoint, it helps transition or transfer or form business processes to be resilient. Identifies innovation capabilities, and it improves the identification of the required data, information, and knowledge to be able to support the precision of decisions of those in the strategic sourcing organization and or their customers. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about why SSVA exists. So, most shared services customers struggle after the initial focus has passed on cost reduction. So I may initially have done this shared services center to reduce costs. Now I want to increase value. SSVA was designed to, once again, identify the risks and value opportunities. How can I maximize my return on my investment? In this case, the shared services environment. That's what SSVA is about. So let's address what comes after the initial cost reduction. The shared services value analysis software focus on not only efficiency but effectiveness. Are we doing the right things? Are we doing them well? Are we missing some things that we should be doing? From what we call a fundamental business activity and step, task, and process that supports those FBAs. Uncovering those unmet and unidentified needs. Now, how does this solution, how does it improve performance? At the bottom you can see the organizational CAP, 28 to 30%. CAP means knowledge, experience, and performance. The three-legged stool where you have to have people that have the knowledge, that have the experience, and have the team perform before. You can see the improvement in security. You can see the improvement in business processes and associated costs. You can see the ROI for improvements to the entire shared services organization, and you can see the improvements around the accuracy of the data. Significant impact based on, once again, the fundamental business activities and the supporting steps, tasks, and processes. So, SSVA, what is it? It is an objective assessment of the entire shared service relationship. It's a repeatable process that compares to best in class. It's going to identify and quantify the risk and value opportunities. The steps, tasks, and processes are very prescriptive. So you know, based on the scoring, what risks are impacting and what needs to be done to mitigate those risks or take advantage of those value opportunities. Every step, task, and process is weighted in its terms of importance to the success of the relationship. there are approximately 140 statements that are scored on a consensus basis by the stakeholders. The stakeholders being representatives from the shared services organization and representatives from the internal customer, as well as the sponsors of this initiative, the shared services environment. The session itself is either facilitated by a business partner of NorthPoint or NorthPoint personnel, or if this is taken internally, it can be run and facilitated by shared services and or client personnel. So let's look at the impact. What we're looking at here is a table that contains data from approximately 30 assessments. So, baseline assessment, second assessment, third assessment, fourth assessment. Typically about 90 days in between those sessions. If you look where the red arrow's at, you'll see the shared services team scoring. You'll also see the internal customer team scoring. You can see the baseline, and you can see the gap between how the shared services team scored the performance and how the internal customers scored the performance. You can see the number of issues, and you can see the communications and where that's being scored. You can look at the second assessment, the third assessment, and the fourth assessment, and you can see the trending of the shared services team scoring, and you can see the significant trending of the customer team from about 41% to greater than 74%. You can see the number of issues. Initially, they go up because they found an avenue, in this case a governance structure, to actually address issues. You can look at the communications. The gap at 51% and the improvement to nearly 80%. Significant impact on the performance of the shared services organization, the viewpoint of the internal customers, and the communications that are taking place. Setting that up to enable the unmet and unidentified needs to come out so that the value can be taken advantage of and achieved versus just the cost. So, value delivered. Speed, it takes a few hours. The analytics behind each statement is weighted to its impact. The value we've identified, and the buy-in and follow-through, which initially wasn't the major focus of the design of this, but an unbelievable outcome because the people, the stakeholders that are involved in this are doing the scoring. It's not being scored by an external consultant coming in and doing an assessment or analysis and having them sort of compare it to a maturity model. These are actually scored by the key stakeholders. These are the people that are most interested in the return on investment. So, the process. Step one, we normally have a separate session for the internal customer, a session for the shared services organization. Once again, part of a day session, scoring of the steps, tasks, and processes. Then we take that, run it against the database, and we come back and we identify the gaps. We run another session called a value risk solution session. Depending if we ran the original one separately, then we'll run the second one separately, meaning one for the internal customer and one for the shared services organization. And then we'll run another session where we close the gaps. Now, I talked about repeatable. You can run this at different points in time, as we showed on the previous slide. Now, step one. Here's an example of an actual statement and the scoring that takes place. So this is a snapshot on the right-hand side of the actual software. So if you look at it, the very top where it says risk that shared services, that's an example of fundamental business activity. In white, beneath that, shared services adds new knowledge, experience, and performance technologies to ABC. That's an example of a step, task, and process. That's what's actually scored. You can see the scoring scale from a -4 to a +4. You can see the definition behind the level associated with the scoring, in this case the percentages. That's what drives the analytics. So once again, you can have a separate section for both the internal customer as well as the shared services organization. This goes well beyond service level agreements. In fact, most of the time when we are pulled into an opportunity to assess, the service level agreements are scored very highly, but the customer's not happy. And that's because service level agreements were designed as a minimum, not what was really expected by the internal customers. Back to the value. Yes, we've reduced costs. How can I get greater value out of this? Which goes to the unmet and unidentified needs. The actual fundamental business activities and the steps, paths, and processes are designed to uncover those unmet and unidentified needs, which then relate to the increased value. So here's some examples on the left-hand side. Excuse me. Identifying fundamental business activities to be assessed. Risk to managing the business effectively and efficiently. Impact on management flexibility on decisions. Process to develop and maintain trust. Strategy alignment. Customer connectivity process. Governance model effectiveness. Those are all areas and more that are actually addressed within the solution. Underneath those, we drill down to the specific areas of measurement. So, what's shared services impact on time to market and time to profitability? Improved use of capital, level of innovation, the value opportunities. You can see examples over on the right-hand side. Uncovering those unmet and unidentified needs. And so examples of areas that are probed include, and so there are examples there. Does this reduce the overall cost structure? Does this reduce the enterprise and/or customer skill requirements? Does it accelerate the receipt and understanding of new knowledge? Does it impact the capital requirements and expenditures? Does it improve the quality, ease of implementation of products and services that shared services organization is supporting? By forcing the key stakeholders to think through these statements and score will drive the prescriptive activities that once again will enable greater value. Here's an example of a gap analysis. So you have the ABC Corp and you have the GBS organization. GBS being the Global Shared Services Organization or Business Services Organization. So significant gaps, absolutely. That's why the process works. We have the right people in the right room with the right statements that are going to drive out the real knowledge of what they're good at, what they're missing, what they hadn't even thought of. In each of those 12 categories, then we can do a drill down. So an example, you can see before we showed you the performance profile, we showed you both from the company and global business services, we showed you the performance gap, and then on the right-hand side you can see the team scoring for each of those steps, paths, and processes. Those scores of those steps, paths, and processes then drive out the prescriptive activities that the teams need to be commissioned and go out and execute on, which are identified over on the right-hand side, or at least some examples of. This is very normal from a performance indices summary. You can see the performance index of the organization and the risk. So their view, performance not so good at 40.58%, risk very high. The provider thinks, oh, we're doing a great job from a performance standpoint, and gee, risk is really low. Significant gap, very typical. So here's the high-level scoring from the 12 areas. In this case, we've taken the percentages and the actual scoring, run them through another algorithm based on implementation capabilities, and we can have a performance points compared to best in class and then a performance profile. all of our solutions, including shared services value analysis, look at a risk index benchmark. So the bottom part of this shows where they're at relative to best in class, relative to high risk, very high risk, medium risk, and low risk organizations. Closing the gaps, most important piece. So these are where the results are viewed, the teams look at what needs to be done, so the action items, the teams are identified, the teams are commissioned, they have due dates associated with them, they go out and perform the improvements, they come back, and then they can report back to the actual stakeholders that were part of the session. The stakeholders can then reconvene and actually go through the assessment to see what additional areas has risk seeped, creeped, and leaked into that shared services initiative. So, shared services value analysis. It's more than an efficiency focus, it's a business effectiveness focus. The purpose of this slide is to show the types of statements that we have, the number of issues that are covered, meaning the number of statements that are associated with it, and percent overall within the solution. It covers scope changes, that covered the ability to identify the issues and irritants, etc., etc. So that's an overview of shared services value analysis. If you have any questions, there's more information available on the website, as well as reaching out to any NorthPoint representative who can address your questions. Thank you very much.